production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the July 18th meeting of the Cary Town Council. And this time I'll recognize Councilmember Yerha, who will lead our ceremonial opening. Mr. Yerha.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start with the question. Where could you find Cary's most historic 5 acres?
Cemetery.
Obviously in Cary.
My house?
The cemetery.
No, that's
Not your house.
The cemetery.
Very good.
Oh.
You get a gold star, Jeff. Hillcrest Cemetery, right in downtown Cary at the end of Page Street. Hillcrest is owned by the town of Cary and is actually one of our official locally designated landmarks in town. Yet I'd bet that the majority of Cary citizens don't even know that it exists. But I would also bet that the majority of Cary citizens know the names that are associated with certain Cary places in town. Names like Maynard, or Harrison, Page, and Walker, of course, Matthews, Adams, Mayton, Heater, Dunham, Bond, Jordan, Jones, both Nancy Jones, Annie Jones, Buck Jones, and any number of other Joneses, and Mr. Herb Young, just to name a few. All of these names are on monuments in Hillcrest Cemetery. In fact, it's the resting place of 15 former mayors of Cary. So why do I bring up Hillcrest Cemetery tonight? Well, some of you may have seen a recent news release from the town, or you may have read Don France's excellent blog a couple weeks ago on the subject, and you know that the cemetery right now is undergoing what we call a refresh, even as we speak. Under the supervision of Anna Redling, our staff's historic preservation guru, and under the supervision of Ginny Johnson, the world's best town clerk. The work itself is being performed by Mr. Michael Verville, who is a renowned expert in historic cemetery renovation. And it's being done in 3 phases over the next 6 months or so. 77 monuments, which have either been damaged or even toppled over the years, are targeted to being restored to their former condition. And that's going to make a noticeable difference in the cemetery. And although Mr. Verville will be doing all the work on the monuments himself, all of you are invited to join in a work day to spruce up the cemetery on Saturday morning, September 7th. It's filling up very quickly. You have to sign up on the town's website. But if you're interested in going out to the cemetery, September 7th in the morning is the time to do it. If you have any questions, you can contact the clerk's office. And if you can't join us on September 7th, I'd encourage you to visit the cemetery at your leisure, perhaps using the walking tour guide put out by the Friends of Page Walker and available at the Page Walker Arts and History Center. You can take a walk or a stroll through Cary's history if you do that. And while you're there, spend a few moments to remember and pay respects to those who have gone before and who have made Cary the great place that it is today. Speaking about paying respects, it's time now to pay respects to the United States of America by pledging allegiance to the flag.
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Yerha, for that history lesson. You always bring stuff that I've never known before, so thank you. We now move to our third item on the agenda. It's a request to adopt the agenda, and we have one change. The applicant of item 5.5, which is 19A05 Hoke and Sade annexation, have asked for the item to be removed from the agenda to allow more time to work with the staff. Is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to recognitions, reports, and presentations. We have so many special guests in our audience this evening. I want to start by recognizing Musa Zaffardine, who's working on his citizenship and community badge. If you would stand up and be recognized. Thank you so much for being here. And we have other guests here. One is actually celebrating a birthday. Cary Rockero, let's... So we're going to do something in my 12 years of being mayor we haven't done before. We're going to sing you happy birthday. All right, here we go. One.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Cary. Happy birthday to you. That's right.
So if you're here, or if you're watching, and if you haven't realized yet that the North Carolina Courage is here, we're excited to have them here, and I would ask that the players, the managers, Paul Riley, everybody associated with North Carolina Courage, if we could gather around the podium for a special presentation.
Awesome.
I think this is another first. I don't think we've had this many people around the podium before.
Winners.
We are so honored that you are here tonight. We love the North Carolina Courage. We are glad that your home base is right here in Cary, North Carolina, and we're so proud of what you've accomplished. You represent, or you're ambassadors, not only for the North Carolina Courage, but for our nation, for our state, and for our town. And we're so appreciative of that. And to honor you and your team and all of your accomplishments this evening, I would like to read a proclamation. And if you haven't heard proclamations before, it's all about whereas. That's the key word. All right, so here we go. Designating July 2019 as North Carolina Courage Month. Whereas North Carolina Football Club is a Cary-based professional soccer organization that owns both a men's and women's professional soccer team which train and play at Wake Med Soccer Park. And whereas the North Carolina Courage, owned by North Carolina Football Club, is a professional women's soccer team that plays in the top tier of the National Women's Soccer League. Whereas the North Carolina Courage has achieved many goals that no other American soccer team has accomplished. And whereas recognizing July as Parks and Recreation Month, it is only fitting to celebrate the accomplishments of the North Carolina Courage. And whereas the North Carolina Courage was the 2017 and 2018 NWSL Shield winners regular season champions, for those of us who don't know what that means, of the NWSL. And whereas the North Carolina Courage won the 2018 NWSL Championship and the 2018 Women's ICC International Champions Cup, and whereas the North Carolina Courage sent 7 players to the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup to play for their countries. They include Canada, Stephanie LeBay, New Zealand, Abby Erzik, Brazil, Debenya, I hope I said that right, and 4 to the U.S., Crystal Dunn, Samantha Mewis, Jessica McDonald, and Abby Dahlkemper. Now, therefore, I, Harold Weimerick Jr., on behalf of the entire Cary Town Council, do hereby proclaim July 2019 as North Carolina Courage Month in the town of Cary, and call upon all the people of Cary to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. Proclaim this 18th day of July 2019.
I wasn't really prepared for this, but I just want to say it's an amazing thing. We've been here for 2 years since we came down from Buffalo. Number one, it's a lot warmer. Number two, the fields have been immaculate at Wakemed, which helps us a lot, and there's no excuse for bad bounces or bad touches or anything like that. But I want to thank the entire town of Cary for welcoming us here. It's been amazing since we got here. We live here, we eat here, we sleep here, and we play here. More sleeping and playing probably than anything else, but we do a lot of it. But on behalf of all the club, everybody here, they've all come back together, so we've got everybody back together finally.
All right.
And
All right.
we're off to Chicago soon, but we will. It's a fun place for us, and I just want to thank everyone for having us, all our fans that are here too, and all the people who come to support us every day. Please come out to the games and support the team. But thank you, Cary, for everything you've given us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I believe we've got our next town crier
That's what I was thinking,
lined up. Yeah, I think you've watched our town crier maybe 10 too many years. It's
Oy
great.
yay.
Oh yay, oh yay.
Oh, yay,
Your
oh,
worship.
yay. I speak. Okay, very good. So now we'll move to our next item on the recognitions, reports, and presentations. We'll turn it over to our town manager, Sean Stiegel, for his update. Try to outdo that.
Well, I'm going to bring us down a couple notches, Mayor. Unfortunately. I just wanted to spend a few minutes updating the council and our citizens on the impact of fiber installation that's occurring throughout our community. In short, things are bad. As bad as I've seen them in Cary, as a matter of fact, as bad as I've seen them throughout my career. Our citizens are tired, they're frustrated, and frankly, some of them are very angry, and so are we here at Town Hall. Since January, installers have contributed to 16 gas line breaks, 6 water main breaks, and 2 water service line breaks. This has resulted in interruptions to existing utility and telecommunication services, street, sidewalks, and driveways being blocked, right-of-ways have been ruined, and frankly, just very, very poor consideration of our citizens and our community overall. All of this is costing time and money not only to our businesses, but to the town of Cary itself. But the time and money pale in comparison to the dangerous conditions that are resulting from many of these incidents. The frustrating part is that the town's legal authority to affect the situation in a meaningful way is severely limited because of state and federal regulations. Even so, or in spite of this fact, we do have an interdepartmental team working not only to respond to the incidents, but to also work with the fiber installers as well as their internet service clients to improve the situation. So instead of just sitting here tired, mad, and angry, we're trying to offer solutions to help our utility partners. We're offering training to installers and their subcontractors on digging safely and legally. We're meeting with corporate representatives of Google and AT&T to ask them to address this situation. And we're even stopping street side to inspect digging operations and having vehicles moved where they're causing sight distance problems or challenges to public access. To further explain that, many of us that are responsible for this community are stopping in our travels and pointing out the things that they're doing wrong and frankly, taking a very strong hand with them, requesting that they do it the right way. So in closing, Mayor, I want everyone to know that we are not only aware of the problems, but we're working on them and will continue to keep you updated.
Thank you, Mr. Stiegel.
Thank you.
We now move to the third item on the agenda, Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at this forum on the printed agenda. And if you would like to speak, I would ask that you take a seat in the rows to my right that are shown as reserved and follow the instructions on the printed agenda. Public Speaks Out speakers have 3 minutes each for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing, and that works to your advantage because you get more time to speak at a public hearing. The 3-minute time limit will be enforced, not to be rude, but to be fair to all of our speakers. There's a timer on the podium, and when that timer turns from green to yellow, that means you have 30 seconds left. And when it turns from yellow to red, that means your time has expired, and at that point, I'll interrupt you. Again, not trying to be rude, but trying to be fair. To have an efficient Public Speaks Out portion of the meeting, we ask that if you're here with a group, have a spokesperson speak for the group to reduce repetitive comments. And also, if you'd like to speak after the person that is currently speaking, I would ask that you stand behind the clerk toward the stairs and wait for your turn. That way we know that there are other speakers ready to speak, and it makes the Public Speaks Out more efficient. I asked everyone in the audience for understanding that this is a business meeting. Please do not applaud, make remarks from your seats, or anything else that may distract from this meeting. So now is the time for Public Speaks Out, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone?
Good evening. My name is George McDowell. May it please your honor, esteemed members of council, Mr. Stiegel, Ms. Simpson, and Ms. Johnson's stand-in. My Public Speaks Out poses a rhetorical question. My question is, where precisely does the Cary Land Development Ordinance, or perhaps some other statute or regulation, address the authority and obligation of the town to regulate the volume of rainwater that falls off a developed piece of property? Frequently, when I ask this question, I'm directed to the LDO, section 7.3, titled Stormwater Management. I've read this section many times and find that it addresses and requires regulation only of the peak rates of flow of water running off developed land during and after rain events of various specified intensities. It is silent as to the volumes of that runoff. A practical illustration of this is shown by a hypothetical but highly probable situation. Consider a piece of property which, before development, would shed 10,000 gallons of stormwater after a particular storm. Consider the same piece of land after development and the impermeable construction on it of homes, driveways, common areas, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and roadways, and that it would shed 15,000 gallons of stormwater after a rain event of equal length and intensity. The only requirement I find that the LDO imposes for mitigation of those additional 5,000 gallons of water is that the flow off the land, the water flow off the land with a peak rate of flow that is less than the peak rate of flow the undeveloped property would have had under precisely the same conditions. In other words, there is no regulation of the amount of water which flows off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. Next speaker, please.
Esteemed members of City Council, Mayor, and all others in attendance, As a resident of Cary and on behalf of the Umstead Coalition, Triangle Off-Road
your
Cycling.
name, please?
Oh, David Allen.
Thank you.
Sir. Triangle Off-Road Cycling and the Capital Group Sierra Club, I ask that Cary Town Council enact a resolution to oppose the lease of the Oddfellows Tract to Wakestone Corporation for a rock quarry on public land. I've been spending time in Umstead since before I could walk, perched on my parents' shoulders. In the years since those family walks, the forests near RDU have been a central part of my life. I spent long, rewarding mornings riding through these forests on my mountain bike, beautiful days hiking along scenic creeks, and romantic evenings watching the sunset linger over Lake Crabtree. Beyond my own experiences, the planned quarry would directly harm fellow residents of the town of Cary. The lease agreement between RDUAA and the Wakestone Corporation stipulates that private homes along Old Reedy Creek Road are to be acquired by Wakestone Corporation, a private company, potentially using the eminent domain powers of RDUAA. Further, surrounding residents will have to suffer through quarry blasts and dirty air instead of being able to simply relax in their homes. RDUAA and the Wakestone Corporation did not consult with the public, residents who live nearby, or the local government prior to making the agreement, and no environmental impact assessment or study has been done to determine the impact on our natural resources and our urban recreational opportunities on the East Coast Greenway and Umstead State Park. The lease agreement between RDUAA and Wakestone Corporation stipulates that the Old Reedy Creek Road is to be used for logging trucks to clear the land and until such time when a bridge is built across Crabtree Creek. The single-lane bridge on Old Reedy Creek Road over Crabtree Creek, as I'm sure you all are aware, is unsafe and major improvements would need to be made to support any type of truck traffic. The burden of these fundings could fall upon Town of Cary taxpayers. Furthermore, increased industrial traffic will make access to the Old Reedy Creek trailhead area difficult for users, maintenance, and emergency vehicles. The Town of Cary has made a huge investment at the Old Reedy Creek trailhead as an integrated piece of the regional greenway network. Between the logging trucks, dust choking the air, and the din of quarry machinery, residents will quickly choose to avoid the corridor if a quarry is put into place, wasting hard-earned taxpayer money. We ask that the Cary Town Council pass a resolution opposing the lease of the Oddfellows Tract to Wakestone Corporation and instead support the purchase of the land by the NC Conservation Fund for incorporation into Umstead State Park. We also invite you and the public to attend a rally at Umstead State Park at Harrison Avenue entrance and the movie premiere at 400 Feet Down at J.C. Ralston Arboretum on Saturday, July 27th. Thank you for your time, and I hope that each and every one of you will stand with me to protect our public lands and the Town of Cary residents who will be harmed by this polluting pit.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Anyone else for public speaks out before we move to public hearings? Seeing no one, will close public speaks out. And before we move to public hearings, we need to go over the consent agenda. This is item 4 on your agenda. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, I want to take a moment to review the consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have ratification of resolution, Anchor Auto Outlet. Ratification of resolution, CPS Clinic. Agreement to allow Verizon communication equipment to remain on the Fire Station 3 monopole. Would council members like any of these items pulled for discussion? If not, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve in its entirety.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we now move to public hearings. Same rules apply for public hearings that apply to public speaks out, with one exception. Speakers now have 5 minutes for their comments. Our first public hearing is on the bond referendum, and our Chief Financial Officer, Karen Mills, will present this item, and then we'll open it up the public hearing. Ms. Mills.
Good evening, Council. I'll start by covering some things you've heard several times before, but they're important to the story for those who may be new to this topic. To start at the beginning, at the May 9th quarterly meeting, we discussed one of the ways that we shape Cary's tomorrow was through the maintenance of our existing infrastructure and construction of new capital projects. At that meeting, we agreed on a plan to finance some of our most important new capital projects and maintenance projects with citizen-approved debt. On May 23rd and June 27th, you took important steps in the legal process to prepare for a referendum on October 8th, which will ask our citizens for up to $112 million of authority for parks and up to $113 million in authority for transportation projects. We're following our schedule, and we're back tonight for the final legal steps to set this process in motion for our citizens' vote. First, we need to hold the public hearing that was called and advertised for tonight. After that public hearing, we recommend that you consider approval of each of the bond orders separately, first for parks and then for transportation. These bond orders, after a successful referendum, will be one part of your authorization in the final process to sell bonds. You'll have the opportunity to take even more legal steps before we incur debt, such as authorizing specific capital projects to be financed. After approval of the bond orders, we recommend that you adopt a resolution that officially calls for the referendum. This resolution establishes the date of the referendum and includes details such as voter registration and legal advertisements. Finally, the resolution officially requests that Wake and Chatham County Boards of Election conduct the referendum. Our next steps involve a citizen education campaign leading up to that referendum and early voting, which begins 2 months from today on September 18th. And with that, Mayor, now is the time for the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Now is the time for the public hearing for the bond referendum, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone here to speak on the bond referendum? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and open it up to council members for questions or comments. Or we can continue moving. These bonds are extremely important to Cary, as you probably realize. A few years ago, more than 1,000 citizens helped create our 2040 Imagine Cary Community Plan. And if we want that plan to work, we're going to need these bonds passed. So I would encourage everyone to make plans now to learn about the bonds and then go to the polls on October 8th and cast your ballot. And if you live in Cary and aren't registered to vote, do that right away. Time's running out. There's information on our website about registering to vote, as well as information about the bonds. And with that, I'll give my colleagues one more chance. Seeing no one, all right. As required by legal proceedings, we must take 3 separate motions, and I'll start with the first one. Is there a motion to adopt Is there a motion to adopt an order authorizing $112 million for Parks and Recreational Facilities bond?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion to adopt an order authorizing $113 million for transportation bonds?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, sorry.
Good. I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution calling for a bond referendum?
So moved.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Looks like we're set to go for October 8th.
All right,
Thank
let's
you,
go.
Ms. Mills.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We now move to our next public hearing. It's Act 11 amendments to the Land Development Ordinance, and Town Code Deputy Manager Russ Overton will present the item, and we'll send it, and we'll open a public hearing. We're not going to take action on this one tonight, but we'll send it to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and return to us in a few months. Mr. Overton.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be here tonight and present this item to you, but probably not as excited as you all are. This is the public hearing for Act 11, specifically the Land Development Ordinance and Code Amendments for moving quasi-judicial decisions to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, as was directed by you at your May 9th quarterly meeting. As mentioned, Council has expressed desire to transfer QJ to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This approach is recommended by the UNC School of Government and followed by most North Carolina cities. This change will allow council to focus on legislative actions that are more broadly applicable to our citizens. While today there are over 100 types of QJ decisions in the town codes and ordinances, with these changes we are proposing to move all but 2 actions to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. What would move is highlighted on this slide in yellow. Council would remain the approval authority only when required by MXD zoning conditions, think about Fenton as an example, or for vested rights, which is rare, which require council action by state law. The Zoning Board of Adjustment currently handles all variances and most appeals today, as well as a few special uses. The proposed amendment would simply shift the responsibility of making most of these decisions from the Town Council to the Zoning Board of Adjustments with no changes to the existing approval criteria. We did take the opportunity to remove some outdated language criteria for cable TV franchising, burial plots, encroachment agreements, taxi permits, parades and picketing, and outside water customers as mentioned in the report. On June 3rd, staff met with the current Zoning Board of Adjustment members to brief them on the possible changes in the scope to their duties, and we plan to go back to them next month as well with an update. If these amendments are approved by council, the Zoning Board of Adjustments would begin hearing the larger suite of QJ cases after the beginning of the board's and commission's new year, likely in October or November. Board recruitment ended on June 30th, and we had more than 20 applicants for the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Staff is currently in the process of reviewing those applicants and will be working with Councilmember Robinson over the next couple of months. And council will then take action on appointing new board and commission members in September. So I want to thank council for their work over the last 7 years. If you don't know it, you heard over 75 cases during that time.
We felt it.
I'm sure you did. I also want to specifically thank Mary Bierman for her work on this project, as well as staff from legal, planning and development, and transportation facilities for working on these changes over the last couple of months. This concludes staff presentation, and I'm available for any questions following the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Overton. Now's the time for the public hearing for Act 11 amendments to the Land Development Ordinance, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, will close the public hearing. And as I said earlier, it's going to go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and you should see it in a few months. Thank you, Mr. Overton. We now move to our third public hearing. It is item 18 REZ 30, Twyla Road North PDD rezoning, and Principal Planner Katie Dry will introduce the item. We will not take action on this item this evening, and it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation. Ms. Dry.
Good evening, Council. This is a public hearing on the Twyla North Plan Development District. This request was presented at a public hearing to you on May 23rd, and since that time, the applicant has proposed to increase the maximum commercial uses and reduce the number of residential units. The LDO requires that once notice of a public hearing for a planned development district rezoning has been sent, any new conditions submitted must be reducing the intensity of a project. Therefore, because of the increase in commercial uses, this case is back before you tonight. This presentation will provide a brief overview of the request, focusing primarily on the changes proposed since May. The site's located on the north side of Morrisville Parkway. It's at a future interchange at NC 540. It's next to the Friars Gate subdivision. The interchange at 540 and Morrisville Parkway is currently under construction and will be open later this year. The current zoning on the properties is R40, and it's within the Watershed Protection Overlay District. The applicants are requesting to rezone to PDD Major with no changes proposed to the Watershed Protection Overlay District. Since the initial public hearing, the applicants have reduced the number of residential units from 420 to 395 units maximum. The applicants have also proposed a minimum and a maximum amount of commercial uses. The range could be between 10,000 to 40,000 square feet, with the ability to trade out hotel rooms as the commercial square footage increases. The applicant also proposes two open space tracts, OS1 and OS2, These tracts are approximately 12 acres combined, and no changes have been proposed to these tracts. And at the previous public hearing, a question was raised about Twyla Road, which bisects the site running north and south. Our experience would indicate curb and gutter would be allowed at this location. However, those details would be worked out at the time of development plan review. And at this time, the applicant has not offered any conditions that discuss curb and gutter. Looking at the C1 tract, which is the non-residential tract, allowed uses in the C1 tract are generally those that would be allowed within the general commercial zoning district. The uses listed on the slide represent many of the uses that would be allowed in the general commercial zoning district. The applicants have excluded certain uses, as shown here with the strike-through. The remaining uses that would be allowed potentially within the C1 tract could include indoor kennel, bank, restaurant, office, hotel, retail, personal service establishments, vehicle filling stations, just to name a few. Staff's preliminary analysis with the Imagine Cary Community Plan, based on the revised rezoning, finds that the site's within a commercial center on the Future Growth Framework map, and the Imagine Cary Plan indicates that commercial centers are defined as having a shopping center of 5 to 10 acres or more. Commercial centers should have a predominant uses of commercial, with incidental uses as office and multifamily. Staff notes that the potential increase in commercial uses finds that the site may be brought further into compliance with the Imagine Cary Plan. And as we shared in May, we were able to see how the entire commercial center may develop for this area. There are active rezoning cases, Twyla North and Twyla South, proposed east of NC 540, and there's an approved development plan for a Lowe's grocery store shopping center to the west of 540. At this time, the development plan for the Lowe's grocery store shopping center has been approved, and staff understands that the developer may be moving forward to begin construction soon. For the second public hearing notice was sent to property owners within 800 feet via mail. The public hearing notice was also posted at the property, and notice was included on the town's website. Cary's practice of mailing public hearing notice to properties within 800 feet exceeds the minimum notice requirements mandated by state law and the Town of Cary's Land Development Ordinance. So this concludes our presentation. The applicant's here to share comments. Following that, in the public hearing, we are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dry. At this time, I would invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Glenda Topp with Glenda S. Topp and Associates. As you know, we had our first public hearing back in May, and at that time, we did go through the entire proposed PDD. Ms. Dry tonight went over the proposed changes, so given what you've heard and what we presented the first time, don't really have anything to add, but I do want to just point out that after the public hearing, we did reach out to the 3 property owners who spoke at the public hearing that live very close to the site. We were able to talk to a couple of them and address their concerns. One primary concern had to do with connectivity, but as we pointed out, the connection to Stock at the end of the street talking about, or that says that it will be connected. But I thought it was important for us to let you know that we did reach out to those people who spoke at the public hearing. The team is here to answer any questions, and also the property owners that spoke at the first public hearing are here too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Topp. Now it's time for the public hearing for 18 REZ 30 Twyla Road North PDD rezoning, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? You can fill that out afterwards.
Good evening. It's good to be here again. My name is Olusegun Ogunaike. I'm actually the property owner that is adjacent to the development. And so So a few months ago, came out here, expressed my concern as a father, new to Cary, talked about what brought me to Cary, talked about why I love this place, why I call it home, and step back a little bit and just listened to everything else that was said afterwards, and also listened to the compelling arguments that the residents that actually are trying to sell their property gave. And I was impressed. I was moved, for all the things they've gone through the last few years, and the compelling case for them to sell and move away, and also, as somebody called it, get the piece of heaven. Let's move this property and let them get the piece of heaven. But as I sat back there listening to everything, I couldn't help but be, and permit me for being blunt a little bit, because I think, just given the situation I'm in, I couldn't help but be disappointed at it almost seemed like the whole event was a check the box activity, that the decision was made, right? And I can understand the whole Cary development plan. I think, it makes sense. And I sat back there, and it almost seemed like we need to get these people, we need to do right by these people. Let them sell their property, let them move away, let them get their piece of heaven. But no one talked about the hundreds of families that live there currently that will be impacted by this, right? And more importantly, somebody even mentioned, there was a petition that was put online. So one of the council members almost implied that it was like faceless individuals that put those petitions up, that these individuals, we don't know where they came from, the numbers show California, the numbers show Texas, they could be anywhere. These are people that live there. And outside, they were actually very disappointed because I spoke to them. And so as I sat back, for me, regardless of whatever happens, I'll be fine. I know that. So I've made up my mind that, it'll be okay. But I couldn't help but just watch the whole show. And I mentioned that day that I'm not against development. I think it makes sense where the property is. At some point, there's a compelling argument that this should be zoned for commercial development. But I just couldn't help but just see how the whole process was and was unfolding. I talked about one thing that day. I said, if we're doing this, let's make sure we're doing it right. That's the most important thing. The developer is not a savior. The developer is there because the road, the Morrisville Parkway, is opening up, and there's an opportunity, and that's why they're there. If that Morrisville Parkway wasn't opening up, the developer wouldn't come. And that's just the economics of it, right? So I can see where they're coming in, and the whole show that day just continued to seem like these guys are here to save us. Nobody liked this place, and now they've come, forgetting that they're there to make their money. And I agree with them. So as a father, I come again to talk to you guys. As you're going through this process, regardless of wherever it shapes out, I just want you guys as the custodians of the community to be very thoughtful. Ensure that, whatever is being done, whatever they agree to, is in the best interest of the community. Because they want to make money, and I don't fault them for it. And they will do whatever it takes to ensure that the economics of the project makes sense for them. But if you do it the wrong way, the hundreds of families that live there will be impacted for a long time. And you don't want to create hysteria in that community. Right now, it seems like a sleepy town. People riding their bicycles. You have Icroft Elementary there. You have Mills Park Elementary, Mills Park Middle. You have all these places, and these communities, these houses are not cheap, right? So if you introduce all this into it, the hysteria these people will feel with everything that's going to happen, I just want you, as a custodians again, to be very thoughtful about it. I spoke to these developers, they're gentlemen, and I shared my concern. I said, no hard feelings, but I'm truly talking to you as a father. And also, just be thoughtful with approving this. If you go ahead and approve it, make sure that these guys are doing the right things in the interest of the community, in the interest of Cary, and not just, what is best for their bottom line. So that's why I've come back again, and wherever this ends up, please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Anyone else for this public hearing? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. I would like to make a few remarks. I'm sorry that your perception is that we don't take things thoughtfully. We do. There's over 90 years of experience up here. We've seen it all, we've done it all, and we've heard it all. And we make sure that we listen to every single one of you, including you. We make sure that we take that in. And then we send it to a group of citizens, not elected people, citizens just like you, who are going to review this, and they're going to give us their opinion. And then we take all of that back in, and we decide on what's best. And I want to assure you that we'll do what we think is best given the information we have. There's no done deals here at this council. I can guarantee you that. There's never a done deal. If anybody comes up here thinking there's a done deal, they're going to get a surprise because we don't think that way. So
thank you very much.
please feel free to contact us with your concerns and questions. We'll make sure they get answered. The Planning and Zoning Board's going to see this probably in a month or two. And they're, like I said, they're a group of citizens. They're going to review it and give us their feedback. And during that time, you can come to any council meeting and speak. If you have other concerns, like you've heard other things, you're always welcome to speak at Public Speaks Out, and we want to hear you. Your input's part of that decision process, so it's very important.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here and speaking.
I'd like to add
Yes.
something. I would just touch on two little points. Occasionally we hear people say that they feel like the vote has already been decided. And I would just like to say as a testament to this council that each of us votes as an individual. We are not a group that decides votes beforehand. And I think it's very admirable because there are a lot of councils where people start chit-chatting before a council meeting and say, oh, you vote for this and then I'll vote for that thing for you later and that kind of thing. That just doesn't happen on this council. We all come in with open minds but strong values that are unique to ourselves, and we place those values before us when we go and look at the vote. And every single vote is done by 7 unique minds, and there's no collusion over the voting. And we change how we align based on the issue. And that's very unusual for councils as well. So I want to assure you that when we considered this, each of us had thoughts about it, but none of us had discussed it in advance and had some kind of vote preconceived about it. The other thing I'd like to say is that when an applicant comes in, he comes in with this vision, he paints this vision, and you know, when we were less experienced, we would kind of go, oh, I love your vision, that's awesome, just do whatever you're gonna do. And then we would be disappointed by the outcome because it didn't align with what the vision was that was shown us. The mayor's right, we have a lot of experience on this council. So when an applicant shows us his vision, we then ask him, what lawful conditions can you give us that will make sure that what you say you're going to do, you're actually going to do? And that gives us greater confidence. So there is a little bit more work that happens after it first gets proposed, because we look at it and we say, this concern is not being met, and we get those conditions added in throughout the process, front-loaded usually. I want you to be assured that there's no lining up of votes beforehand, and there's no easy pass for any of the applicants that come in here. We do look at the best interest of the whole community.
And to follow up on those conditions, I can say that when I look at a project, I don't care what you've said. If you don't have it in a condition, I ignore it. And I actually think of the worst-case scenario. You might remember a slide of all the things that can go there. I was looking at that slide thinking, what is the worst possible thing that could go there? And that's how I think.
It's a gas station with an outdoor kennel.
Yeah,
Gas station with a kennel.
So that's how we think.
Crematorium.
Yeah. So again, please feel free to contact us in the future. And colleagues, do you have anything else to add before we send this on?
The only thing I have to mention is I first thank you, Mr. I, for following up on the curb and gutter. One of the comments that you made was it's allowed rather than required. And so I would stress to the applicant our collective interest in no private streets and no and having curb and gutter. So whether that needs to be a condition of some sort, I'm sure that we would all be very interested in that. The allowed, I would prefer to be required or offered as a condition. So I know that can't necessarily be done at this point because there is a stream buffer there, and the Army Corps of Engineers might have to get involved, but just be aware that that's something that council has made actually a public comment that we are moving towards that.
And that's one of the things we were just talking about. If it's not a condition, we have to assume that it's not going to be there.
Exactly.
So, other comments?
I'll dovetail on what Mrs. Robinson said. I'm living proof that sometimes we change our minds here at the table.
We do.
It happens.
Yep.
So it's not a predetermined outcome.
Okay. Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
would just add to, please don't confuse empathy for people with any predetermined outcome. Many of the concerns that citizens have expressed to us about the new project, we've heard a lot of very similar concerns from the residents who lived on Twyla Road, and the changes that they experienced over the years, longer than many of these homes have even been there. So as we consider the wishes of the community, that's existing neighbors, that's property owners, that's also the business community, and that's also our land use plans and, you know, the vision for the area of town. So if some of us expressed empathy for some of those folks who have endured a lot for a long time, I would just ask people not to confuse that with any predetermined outcome.
Very good. Other comments? Okay. We're going to send, as I said, this to the Planning and Zoning Board, and they're going to review it in a month or two from now, and they're going to make recommendations, and it will come back to us a month or two after that, and then we'll make a decision at that point, unless there are major changes by the applicant, and that would delay it further. But it's at least 2 or 3 months away before we get to a decision. So thank you, Ms. Try. We now move to our next public hearing is 19 RZ05 Searstone Phase 2 PDD Amendment. And Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item. And once again, we'll not take action on this item tonight. It's going to be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. For your consideration is a request to amend a portion of the Searstone Plan Development District located at 17,001 Searstone Drive on approximately 30 acres. The subject property is highlighted in yellow. It's located to the west of Preston Forest, north of the Fenton Estate subdivision, and on the opposite side of the street of the White Bridge subdivision and the Cornerstone Shopping Center. The existing zoning and the proposed zoning is both Planned Development District Major. As you may recall, this was first presented to you back in 2001 and first approved in 2002 as a continuing care retirement community with a retail village. It was amended in 2004.
I do.
It was amended in 2008. It was amended in 2015. If this seems like it's a little bit familiar to you, it is also to me, because I presented each one of those cases. In fact, one of the residents at Searstone actually asked me if I was hired specifically at the town of Cary to be the liaison for the Searstone project. And it does feel that way at some times because I am very familiar with this. So what was currently presented and what exists today has changed. This is what we have now. The currently approved Searstone Plan Development District predominantly consists of a continuing care retirement community, phases 1 and phases 2, residential, healthcare, neighborhood amenities. There's also the village component, office, retail, and hotel, portions of which have been completed. And then phase 3, which is approved for residential multifamily, and that has not been constructed. So the overall density is for 355 multifamily units, 48 duplex units for independent living, a 96-bed assisted living facility, the retail village, and then the associated amenities and accessory uses, and the hotel has not been constructed. What's before you tonight is just phase 2, portion that has not been completed in the continuing care retirement community. These white footprints show the buildings that were approved for future residential multifamily but have not yet been constructed. This shows you an example of an existing residential multifamily that was approved as part of phase 1, and the existing clubhouse, which includes dining facilities, meeting facilities, and several apartments that was also completed as part of phase 1. The existing healthcare facility is completed as part of Phase 1, and Phase 2 proposes an expansion of that facility. Phase 2 also has a conservatory site, and that's something that has been proposed for a change, hence the amendment. There's also a roadway, Searstone Drive, that bisects the residential portion of the Searstone Planned Development Community. The applicant has requested an amendment and has submitted a preliminary development plan that significantly changes the layout of the residential multifamily buildings. Instead of those 3 separate buildings that I showed you that looked like this footprint here, they're proposing one integrated building that also would include an auditorium or multi-purpose room, a cafe, and dining facilities. That road that bisected the site now would terminate in a motor court area in front of the building, so the route for vehicular traffic would be around the building rather than right through the center of the site. Community gathering space is proposed, a large area here on the site that used to be one of the independent living multifamily buildings. Community space integrated into the new building footprint here, and a number of amenities associated with these spaces are listed in your staff reports. This area is approximately 40,000 square feet of community gathering space that was not on the previous plan. And probably one of the biggest changes that's been proposed is the removal of the conservatory. Now, what is a conservatory, you might ask? Staff has asked that question as well. What we have as zoning conditions in the PDD are the size, 20,000 square foot minimum, 30,000 square foot maximum, 2 stories, to be constructed as part of Phase 2, how it would be sited on the property. What we don't have is what a lot of people were expecting. They were shown examples of this model and pictures that showed this wonderful botanical conservatory, or something that could also be used for events, ballets, recitals. None of this was part of the PDD document. The model did show it, a lot of neighbors were shown it, and a lot of residents were shown it. But we didn't have it defined, the programming wasn't included in the traffic study, and the parking didn't really address it. The applicant is a new owner. It's no longer Mr. Sears, so the ownership is now under Samaritan Homes, and they have asked to replace this conservatory with additional outdoor community gathering space. Property owners within 800 feet of the subject property were notified, and this exceeds the state and the land development ordinance requirements. The property was posted and advertised. There were 2 neighborhood meetings, one here at Town Hall on April 3rd, and one at the Searstone facility on June 13th. All of the residents, with one exception, have voiced support for this request that we've heard from. There were concerns about drainage and the loss of the conservatory site voiced by 2 adjacent property owners. I've received 1 phone call from a resident concerned about the placement of the new building that's proposed. And then we've also heard support from neighbors about the potential reduction in traffic impacts by not having that conservatory that would be open to the public. In regard to the drainage questions and issues, according to our GIS maps, the site is impacted by wetlands and stream buffer. Field determination of such features shall be required at the time of development plan review. And I'd like to point out that there is a zoning condition that development on the site would be mitigated to a 50-year storm event, and that condition would remain intact. So this concludes staff's presentation. Following the applicant's comments and the public hearing, I'll be available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Granite. This time I would invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
I apologize. I'm sorry, I had just a couple more slides to show you.
Hold on.
Sorry about that. But almost finished. Just wanted to point out also that the stream buffers remain in place and that the applicant is addressing stormwater management on the site, and that this is in a commercial mixed-use center. The uses are appropriate, and our preliminary analysis finds that this request does address the live, work, and shape chapters. Now it's time for the applicant's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Granite.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Tony Teague. I'm with Greenbrier Development. We are a development consultant that works for Samaritan Housing Foundation. Samaritan Housing Foundation is the owner of the Searstone Continuing Care Retirement Community. Currently, Searstone offers several products, if you will, to the seniors of the region. We offer independent living in the form of both apartments and cottages, and we also have health care available that is in both assisted living and skilled nursing. We're here before you to explain that Searstone needs to expand. We currently are full in independent living. We also have a 70-person wait list of people waiting to move into our community. The healthcare building was just expanded not too long ago. We added some additional beds to care for the demand that we have. There's also, as our current resident population continues to age, we are forecasting additional healthcare needs for our residents. We also are just experiencing a strong demand for senior living in the Cary region, in the entire region. Sorry. The current site plan, the one on the left, does not meet all of the needs or demands of today's seniors. You'll notice that the buildings are separated. 3 separate buildings that do not contain the amenity space that the seniors of today want. There's no dining provisions, no meeting place provisions, no activity areas, and we need to have that in order to provide the seniors with the lifestyle that they want to live. When we first got involved in this project several years ago, we met with the current residents of Searstone. We had several meetings with them to understand what they liked and did not like about the current community, and also understand what we need to incorporate into the new plan. What we heard from them was they want connectivity. They want additional dining options. They want more amenity space. They want activity areas to congregate and have fellowship with their other friends. I think that we're accomplishing that with this proposed site plan. The proposed plan would be a connected buildings, if you will. It offers additional dining venues for their options. It has a multi-purpose room that can be used for many different functions, meetings, plays, orchestra, whatever. So what we propose with this new plan, we feel meets the needs of the future seniors, of the region, and of the community at large. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So now's the time for the public hearing for 19 REZ 05 Searstone Phase 2 PDD amendments, and I would invite our first speaker forward.
Evening. My name is Alfred Port. My wife and I moved into Searstone Retirement Community in November 1st, 2013 in the Winston Clubhouse. I was the first family that moved in there, so we know where all the ghosts are. We purposely selected our unit, which is located on the 2nd floor, which is facing east. From our unit, we can see the morning sun every day. That's important for a guy at my age, to see the sun every morning. We see the fountain and the pine trees. I knew someday that there would be a new building identical to Calais, which would be 4 stories high, have underground parking, But that building would not block our existing view. That's according to the original plans, and that should have been Phase 2 plans. The new proposed Phase 2 building is also 4 stories high with underground parking garage, but it will be located directly in front of my unit, 50 feet away from me, blocking all the views. There are more than just myself that would be blocked, the views will be blocked. So we'll be looking directly into the new building. The new neighbors will also be looking directly into our building. So I see that as a problem. I did not sign up for this. If I wanted a tenement environment, I would have moved to a different unit or something like that. But let me make this perfectly clear. We know we need Phase 2, and that's a fact. But in good conscience, I cannot support this part of Phase 2. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will consider our concern.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Anyone else for this public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. I'm John Cook. I represent Samaritan Housing Foundation. It's a nonprofit, by the way. I just wanted to let you guys know that. The purpose of my remarks are limited really to talking about the conservatory site and to speak about it plainly. Mrs. Granite did a very nice job in explaining it. Many of you have lived all 4 of these rezonings on the Searstone and Sears Farm PDD, so I don't need to tell you about it. And there's no way to sugarcoat this. There was a promise for a conservatory there, and it was a big promise. She showed you the slide on that. Now, 20 to 30,000 square feet, half a football field is about 28,000 square feet. That was how big that was going to be. But let me just share some facts with you. That promise was made 2001 when Mayor Lang was presiding this council, with no residents at all at Searstone. That site has remained dormant for 18 years. Compare that to what's happening elsewhere in town during those 18 years. What I would suggest to you is that disconnection tells us a lot, that it's strong evidence that that site will never develop until and unless it's rezoned to something that's plausible. Because the promise was a privately funded, privately operated conservatory, a large one. Keep in mind also, since that time, you have gotten much more into the arts and cultural business for opportunities for your citizens. In particular, the Cary Art Center, 2010, the Cary Theater, 2014. Remember, this promise was made actually the year after the amphitheater opened. That's how old this promise is. And in planning for these facilities, one thing I'm sure you're aware of is traffic management's pretty important. If this was going to be that large of a facility and these people were going to come to the middle, to the heart of a retirement community, to these events, there's no traffic management plan. These roads were designated residential by the PDD. And that is a great concern of the residents. The second thing I would point out to you is that nobody knows what that was really going to be. Was this going to be a facility that was going to be additive? Or was it going to be a competing facility that competed with town facilities? None of it was ever fleshed out. So what I would suggest is the promise hasn't survived the test of time. And it was a promise. But we are here with a full facility. People want that land to be used for something. And so when we started our application, we didn't own that site. We have a way to design without using that site. But while we were working on that plan, Mr. Sears and Sears Farm filed bankruptcy. Bankruptcy, that's a risk and that's an opportunity. It's a risk because you don't know who's going to own the track in the middle of your retirement community. But it's an opportunity because it might be you. And so we acquired it in the bankruptcy proceeding. And our board of directors said, we want to do it right. Start all over again. Plan this out to meet all of our needs of our residents and also provide something for the general community. And so everybody's explained to you what that is. It's a more connected facility. It's a more safe facility with no drive-throughs. It's also a facility with an acre, close to an acre, of community gathering space that wouldn't be there otherwise. So my final point to you would be this. The people who are most impacted, the residents of Searstone, and I trust you have their letter from their board of directors that supports this rezoning, would be the ones who supposedly would be least harmed by the laws of the conservatory, but they support this rezoning because it's plausible, it's workable, and it's the kind of community they would like to live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker for this public hearing. Anyone else? Going to close the public hearing, and before I open it up to my colleagues, I want to tell the applicant what I'm thinking. I was here for most of the rezonings. I was out 4 years, so I missed some of it. And I think back to the original proposal and how difficult that was, and I don't think it would have passed without what was promised to us. And so trying to get away from that, but that memory is in my head. I cannot get away from that. We were promised all these things. Now, I totally get that you can't build this conservatory, but what I'm seeing is more residential, which is needed, and an open grass area. And I want a compelling reason to get behind this, and so far that's not it. I wanted you to tell me more about, or with conditions or whatever, about this open space and how that's going to help the residents and how that's going to be beneficial. I can't imagine they'll be going out there tomorrow if it were there because it'll be 100 degrees, you know. How's it going to be beneficial to them? I get the rest of it. I agree with that. I understand the conservatory thing. But again, over time, we've lost everything that was, not everything, we've lost a lot of what was promised to us. And now we're left with this, which is, to me, disappointing from what we were originally promised. So again, I'm looking for a compelling reason. I totally understand there has to be something different, but this might not be it for me. So help me out here, and that's where I'm going with that. So.
Yeah, I'll weigh in a little bit. Now I'll actually give you a little bit of history on why there was a conservatory even proposed in the first place. Mr. Sears came to us at the time and he said, I understand that this is going to be not generating any property tax for the community, and I want to do something to give back to the community to compensate for the fact that we will be putting a use in here that doesn't have any type of tax generation. And he asked me for an idea, and I said, I don't want to tell you what to do. If you want to do something for the community, do something that you're passionate about. And as you recall, Mr. Sears was very passionate about vegetation and horticulture, as his parents were. And so that's what he came forward with, was this idea for a conservatory. And it is, you know, it's disappointing to see what has happened to this project, because I'm sure you remember very vividly as I do, because it was so poignant when they came in with this three-dimensional on a table. Remember that? It was like this, it was absolutely stunning and beautiful vision of what was going to go on this site. But little bit by little bit, it's been kind of sold off and changed and amended over the years. I understand the need for connectivity, because I agree with you. I think seniors do appreciate having the ability to move in a greater space, all indoors and not going outside. So I think that is relevant. I think the other changes that they're making are relevant. To the mayor's point, I would really put some conditions in there to talk about how this open space, the amenity that you're going to give us, this compensates for the conservatory, how it's going to be done in such a way that it has elements that really make it usable for the senior community. And I say that because I've gone over to Searstone many, many times. There's not enough plantings around your lake. It's too hot in the summer for people to enjoy really walking around the lake. I'd like to make sure that this one is, the conditions are in there that really tie it down to be a really usable space year-round. The other thing I'd say, and we deal with this all the time, is the need to, when you put something in, to not adversely affect the people who are there already. I would be really ticked if I owned something on that east side of the Winston building and this building was going to come up right against me. So much so that I think it might be a good idea for you guys to go back and reconceive the layout of that building. Because if it's going to net out in a generally unpleasant living condition for some people, why start with that? They have so much space right there. They can configure the building differently so that it doesn't have to do that. So those are my observations. It's sad about the conservatory, but I think it was, the writing was on the wall for a long time on that. So I'm okay getting a green space in an exchange for it. I just want to make sure that that green space is going to be heavily vegetated and done in such a way that it's going to be a real amenity for the people who live there.
And I'm glad you said that, because I want to piggyback on what you said. The value of the conservatory, because I was on the Planning and Zoning Board when this came by, was exactly that public use. And so if you're taking away the public use, it would be great if there was some public value to the green space. So for instance, I think right now the PDD has it at the support of a 50-year storm. Well, you're putting in new BMPs, why not jump up to a 100-year storm, right? Because some sort of public value, since we're losing some of the public value, it would be great for there to be some additional benefit.
To me, to speak to everybody's points, I guess, so far, Ms. Robinson, I agree with your comments wholeheartedly. I think you articulated the history and where we're at today very well. I wasn't as deeply invested in this as some of you, but it's helpful. To me, the compelling reason or public value is the dire need for assisted living, senior housing that we have in our community. We all know we're now, based on age, the second oldest city in the state. We're not getting any younger.
We're not.
Yeah,
No, we're not. None of us are getting any younger. And the reason is because Cary's such a dang awesome place to live that when everybody moves here, they don't want to leave. So as people live here and grow older here and then ultimately age out of their homes here, they need other places to go. And we don't have them. We don't have enough. We just heard they have a 70-person waiting list, which actually sounded a little low to me, honestly, compared to Glen Eyre or some other facilities that we have throughout town that are in the hundreds. So there's clearly a demonstrated need for additional senior housing, assisted living, and healthcare opportunities. So to me, that's a compelling reason or a public value in providing adequate housing for our seniors. But I agree with what you're saying in that it needs to be of the highest quality possible. To me, I honestly, conservatory, I'm like, whatever. I don't really care. I value the additional units in the residential way more in a conservatory that, for all the reasons we've heard discussed, we're probably going to cause more issues or can cause more issues than maybe the benefit they provide. So, but yeah, to the public spaces, the quality, the ensuring that it is of somehow honors that original caliber of project that we were promised in the beginning. I agree with that.
Other comments? Ms. Urha, weren't you chair of the P&Z at that time?
And I remember that 3D model very, very well, and bought into it hook, line, and sinker. But realized, as Mrs. Robinson said, for a long time that it was just not going to happen. And it's very disappointing. But I think part of the reason why we may be gun shy, it's not just for the conservatory, but we've seen so many amendments over the years to Searstone, and although we've passed them, approved them, I don't think too many of us are very happy with a lot of those amendments. They've
We were holding our
farther and farther away from the original concept. And I think that's probably why I'm gun shy. I really don't object. Looking at the picture in front of us right here, I can't find a lot to object to. I mean, I think it's going to be a needed addition to the plan. But because we've seen so many amendments that, I mean, a tire store was not on the original plan, for example. So I think we're a little gun shy when it comes to that, looking at this new one. Realized I love the conservatory, but I realized it wasn't going to happen for some time, and why.
Mr. Smith, you were on council when Davis Drive and High House were two-lane roads.
Dirt. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you all said it, and I'd be repeating it. I think the only perspective that I have is when that model came out, if you look at geographically, we actually had conversations. This is actually the center point of Cary. You know, if you looked at 70 square miles and you tried to find a center point, it was Davis and High House. And this was going to be our shining star. It was going to be something that just modeled all those things we brag about that makes Cary so special. So, you know, the conservatory. And if there was ever a development that bit by bit, you know, piece by piece, a death of 1,000 cuts, has gone from a dream and a vision that would have been so perfect, you know, we're just kind of left with something, candidly, just very underwhelming. And it was difficult, and, you know, you get smarter with hindsight, but piece by piece, as we approved all those amendments, and, you know, just a little thing, like you said, you go over there and it's like naked. I mean, there's, you know, there's twigs. I mean, it's been 18 years. You know, why isn't that one of our most healthy, at least from a green perspective, healthy and most robust place? I struggle like you do, Mayor, because it's not that this is not needed, but it's like, here we go again with a kind of like a C- idea with not a lot of thought, clearly trying to get by in the most cost minimal way, which is what ruined Searstone, that cost minimal way. And here we go again. You know, at the same time, the whole idea of adding the units that we desperately need for seniors is important. One of the frustrations I have on a personal basis is I just don't have a suggestion of what to do. This is where I really hope there are some minds out there, creative minds, that can listen to our concerns and try to come back with something that isn't just, geez, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, like a Waffle House. I don't need a Waffle House. I want something that's just a little bit better for Cary, and that it can still be a beautiful site. But boy, has that really hurt our look and feel for that whole region over there, that whole area, from my perspective.
Mr. George, anything to add?
Yeah, I would, because I'm new to the party on this, but it's in my district, and when I knocked on doors of all these houses up behind that place, I was not expecting the earful that I got about what had happened to their backyards. And this huge wall of dirt and these rising, towering buildings behind them, and there was so much angst from the neighbors that back up to it. So when I think about and now to think about this Winston Clubhouse and blocking someone's view, as was mentioned, it bothers me. You know, not to redesign, but I could live with higher buildings in this lower quadrant over where there's green, because it's closer to Davis, and it's not blocking, it's not in anybody's view. I could live with higher, denser, more underground parking, less surface, covered intensity, to do something in a different way to make it, if we can get something better. I mean, I feel like but not on the side where people have to look up and see towering buildings behind them, because that was what their fear was, and that's what they faced. So I think it's, I could do that. I think even, whether there's more units, if we're going denser and we're going deeper with parking, or 3 underground levels, whatever it takes. I'm saying I could do something to be creative. I think be creative. I think it's I'm underwhelmed by this, and the blocking of the view. When I started looking at that, that's unbelievable. I feel like I'm in like New York City, looking at an interior block where I didn't choose to live, and I definitely have empathy. But still, as Don mentioned the word empathy earlier, they don't make a decision based on empathy, but I've got to consider the whole, and I am a little underwhelmed with this design.
So you've heard a lot of feedback, and we do that to help you. So hopefully you'll take that feedback and come up with some ideas. We would love to hear them. And till then, it's scheduled to go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation. That'll happen within a month or two, and then we'll see it a month or two after
And
that.
just a point of clarification, there is no proposed increase in density or unit count. So,
that. That's
yeah,
what
just
I
wanted
said.
to make sure that that was clear, that they're working within the parameters of the existing entitlement and the building heights that have already been approved.
Thank you, Ms. Granite. Okay, our 5th public hearing was removed at the beginning of the meeting, and now we move to our 6th public hearing, which is 19A07 Perez annexation. Mr. Nicholas will introduce the item, and we may take action this evening. Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. This request is for annexation of 4.9 acres located at 1123 Wake Robin Lane, approximately 950 feet north of the intersection of Branton Drive. The property is contiguous to the corporate limits. It's located within Cary's ETJ, and it's zoned residential 40. The request is not associated with a development plan or rezoning. The property is currently vacant, and the owners wish to connect to town utilities and construct a detached dwelling on the property. There's a water line on the western portion of the subject site, and the sewer is located on the adjacent property to the north. In accordance with the town's regulations, the property must be annexed before it can connect to utilities. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Now's the time for the public hearing for 19A07 Perez annexation, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Open it up to council members for questions, comments, or motion.
Make a motion to approve annexation petition 19A07.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. We move to our final public hearing, 19A06 Timothy G. Howard annexation. Mr. Nicholas, once again, will introduce the item, and we may take action. Mr. Nicholas.
This request for annexation of a 3.9 acre property located at 7009 Carpenter Fire Station Road and a 0.3 acre portion of property located at 7005 Carpenter Fire Station Road. The properties are contiguous to the corporate limits. They're located within Cary's ETJ and zone transitional residential conditional use. The request is associated with a development plan that proposes a subdivision of 41 townhomes within the proposed annexation area. The plan also subdivides the adjacent property to the east, which is already in the town's corporate limits, to allow for an additional 48 townhomes. The plan is currently in the review process, and based on the provisions of the LDO, it can be approved administratively when it is determined that the plan meets all the applicable requirements of the LDO. In accordance with the ordinance, the properties must be annexed before the development plan can be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Now's the time for the public hearing for 19A06 Timothy G. Howard annexation, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council for questions, comments, or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the annexation petition 19A06.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That was our last public hearing. We have no discussion item, but we do have a closed session. So at this time, I'll call on our Mayor Pro Tem Bush to read our closed session motion.
Pursuant to GS 143-318-11A, 3 and 4, I move that we hold a closed session to discuss matters related to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the town, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the town in negotiations, consult with attorneys employed by and/or retained by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is made privileged or confidential, GS 143-318-10E.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we move into closed session. reconvene our council meeting. We have no other business scheduled this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we are adjourned.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.